Once upon a time, in a small village nestled between green hills, there lived a young man named Ben. He was not the tallest or the strongest, but there was something about him that made all the girls in the village fall in love with him. His kindness, his warm smile, and the way he helped others made him very special. But there was a big problem: every girl in the village wanted to marry him. Ben had no idea how he became so popular. He was just an ordinary boy who loved to help people. He would help old Mrs. Mary carry her groceries, he would fix broken fences for Mr. John, and he would always lend a hand to whoever needed it. But all the girls in the village, from the oldest to the youngest, seemed to think Ben was the perfect match for them. Lily, the baker's daughter, was the first to fall in love with him. She loved how Ben always stopped by her bakery to buy a loaf of bread and chat with her. She dreamed of the day they would marry and live happily ever after. She even made a cake just for him, hoping he would notice her. Then, there was Sarah, the farmer's daughter. Sarah worked hard on her father's farm, tending to the animals and growing vegetables. She admired Ben from a distance, but whenever they talked, her heart would race. She felt he was the one who could make her life complete. But Lily and Sarah were not the only ones. There was Emma, who loved to play the violin and always imagined Ben sitting beside her while she played beautiful songs. There was also Anna, the artist, who dreamed of painting Ben's portrait for the rest of her life. One sunny morning, something strange happened. Ben noticed that the girls in the village were all acting a little different around him. They were all shy and nervous, trying to catch his attention. Ben felt confused, unsure of what was going on. Why were they acting this way? He decided to visit his best friend, Tom, who lived in the next village. Tom had always been there for him, and Ben needed someone to talk to. As Ben walked to Tom's house, he couldn't help but wonder if his life was going to change forever. When Ben arrived at Tom's house, he immediately blurted out his worries. "Tom, something's happening in the village. All the girls want to marry me. I don't know what to do." Tom laughed, but then he saw the serious look on Ben's face. "You're a good person, Ben. That's why everyone loves you. But you have to make a choice. You can't marry them all." Ben sighed, knowing Tom was right. But how could he choose? How could he possibly pick just one girl when they all seemed so perfect in their own way? The next day, the girls in the village started to act even more strangely. They would follow Ben around, bring him gifts, and try to impress him with their talents. It seemed like every time Ben turned around, there was a girl waiting for him with a smile on her face. Ben felt trapped. He couldn't make anyone sad, but he didn't want to hurt anyone either. He loved all of them, but not in the same way. He couldn't marry them all, but how could he choose just one? The village became divided. The girls began to argue over who should marry Ben. They would talk behind each other's backs, whispering about their plans to win his heart. The village was full of tension, and Ben didn't know how much longer he could take it. One evening, as Ben walked through the village square, he saw the girls sitting together. They weren't arguing anymore. Instead, they were all staring at him, waiting for him to make a decision. Ben felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. He knew that whatever he said next would change everything. He took a deep breath and spoke. "I'm sorry, but I can't choose any of you. I don't want to hurt anyone, and I don't want to make a decision I'm not ready for. I need time to think." The girls were silent, but Ben could see the hurt in their eyes. He hated seeing them like this, but he knew he had to make the right choice for himself. As the days passed, the village grew quieter. The girls no longer followed Ben around, and the tension slowly started to fade. But Ben still felt torn. He didn't know how to fix everything. He knew he had to make a decision, but he couldn't bring himself to hurt anyone. One day, as Ben sat by the river, thinking deeply, an old woman approached him. She had white hair and kind eyes, and she smiled at Ben as she sat next to him. Ben, she said softly, sometimes, the hardest decisions are the ones that come from the heart. You don't have to choose anyone if you don't feel ready. It's okay to wait until you know who is truly right for you. Ben looked at her, grateful for her wisdom. But I don't want to hurt anyone. They all seem so perfect. The old woman chuckled gently. No one is perfect, Ben. The right person for you will understand your heart. And sometimes, the heart knows long before the mind does. Ben thought about her words for a long time. The next day, he decided to talk to the girls. He gathered them together in the village square and told them what he had been thinking. He explained that he needed more time to figure out his feelings and that he couldn't rush into making a choice. At first, the girls were disappointed. But then, one by one, they understood. They realized that Ben was being honest with them, and they appreciated his honesty. The village returned to normal, and Ben felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt before. He knew that when the time was right, he would know who he was meant to be with. Until then, he would focus on being the kind, caring person he always was, helping others and living his life. And as time went on, Ben's heart began to heal. He knew that one day, he would find the right person, and when he did, he would be ready. But for now, he was content knowing that he had made the right choice for himself. The girls in the village also learned an important lesson. They learned that love couldn't be rushed and that sometimes, it was okay to wait for the right person to come along. They became friends again, and the village returned to its peaceful, quiet ways. And Ben? Well, he found his happiness, not because he married someone, but because he had the courage to listen to his heart. And the village lived happily ever after. Days turned into weeks, and the village slowly began to settle back into its peaceful rhythm. Ben continued to help those in need, just as he had always done. He would visit old Mrs. Mary to help her with her garden, lend a hand to Mr. John when his horse broke a shoe, and spend time with the children teaching them how to fish by the river. But something had changed inside Ben. He had spent so much time thinking about his feelings and the pressure of making a choice. Now, he realized that it wasn't about picking one girl or another, it was about finding someone who truly understood him, someone who would accept him for who he was, without the need to prove anything. One morning, as the sun peeked over the hills, Ben took a walk through the forest, his favorite place in the village. The tall trees whispered in the wind, and the soft, earthy scent of moss and pine filled the air. Ben loved this place. It was peaceful and quiet, the perfect place to clear his mind. As he walked deeper into the forest, he spotted Sarah. She was sitting on a large rock by the stream, her legs tucked under her, quietly watching the water flow by. Ben hadn't seen her much since he had made his decision to take time to think things over. It was strange to see her here, so far from the village. But there she was, lost in her thoughts, just like him. "Sarah," Ben called softly. Sarah looked up, surprised to see him. "Ben, what are you doing here?" Ben smiled and walked over to her. "I come here when I need to think. It's peaceful, don't you think?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, it's the one place I can really think clearly." Ben sat beside her on the rock, his heart racing. He had something important to say, something he had been thinking about for a long time. "Sarah," he began, his voice trembling a little, "I've spent so much time trying to figure out what I want. I was so focused on making the right choice for everyone else, that I forgot to listen to what my heart was saying." Sarah looked at him, her eyes soft and understanding. "Ben, you don't have to explain. I know what you mean. It's hard when everyone expects something from you, but you can't please everyone all the time." Ben looked down at his hands, feeling the weight of his thoughts. "I know. And I've realized something I should have known all along. I don't need to choose right now. I need to follow my heart, and that's the only way I know what's truly right for me. Sarah smiled warmly. And that's all you can do, Ben. Listen to your heart, and the right path will reveal itself. Ben felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had finally said the words that had been on his mind for so long. He didn't have to rush. He didn't have to choose right away. He just needed to take things one step at a time. As the days passed, Ben and Sarah began to spend more time together. They would meet in the forest, by the river, or in the village square. They talked about everything, about their dreams, their fears, and their hopes for the future. It wasn't like the other girls in the village. It was different with Sarah. There was no pressure, no expectations. Just two people, getting to know each other. One evening, as they walked together through the village, Sarah turned to Ben. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked. Ben looked up at the sky, the stars beginning to twinkle in the darkening sky. "I do," he said quietly. "I think about it a lot. But I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'll be ready for everything life has in store for me." Sarah smiled gently. "That's okay. No one knows what the future holds. We just have to trust that whatever comes, we'll be ready." Ben stopped and turned to face her. "Sarah, I think I'm starting to understand what it means to truly love someone. It's not about finding the perfect person or making the right choice. It's about being with someone who accepts you, who helps you grow, and who stands by your side, no matter what." Sarah's eyes sparkled with warmth, and she reached out, taking Ben's hand. "And I'll be here, Ben. I'll be here with you, every step of the way." From that moment on, Ben and Sarah's bond grew stronger. They weren't in a hurry, and they didn't need to rush. They enjoyed each other's company, and every day, they learned something new about each other. The village began to see the change in Ben. He wasn't the boy who was always torn between different girls anymore. He had found someone who truly understood him, and they were building something beautiful together. But not everyone in the village was happy about this. Some of the girls, still hurt by Ben's decision, couldn't understand why he had chosen Sarah over them. They didn't see the quiet moments, the long talks, and the smiles that passed between Ben and Sarah. All they saw was that Ben had made a choice, and it wasn't them. One afternoon, as Ben and Sarah walked down the village road, Lily approached them, her face filled with anger and frustration. "Ben," she said, her voice sharp, "why her? Why not me? I've done everything I could to get your attention, and yet you chose Sarah." Ben's heart sank. He had hoped that things had settled, but now it seemed like the past was coming back to haunt him. Lily's words were like a slap in the face. But Ben remained calm. "Lily," he said gently, "I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt anyone. But love doesn't work like that. It's not about trying to win someone over. It's about being with the person who makes you feel whole, the person who understands you without having to try." Lily looked down at the ground, tears filling her eyes. "I thought I was the one for you. I thought we could be happy together." Ben sighed, wishing there was an easy way to make things right. But he knew that sometimes, even with the best intentions, people couldn't always get what they wanted. "I'm sorry, Lily," Ben said softly. "I really am. But I have to follow my heart, and right now, my heart is with Sarah." Lily turned away, her face flushed with emotion. But Ben didn't regret his decision. He knew that he had chosen the right path, even if it was hard. And so, Ben and Sarah continued to build their life together, hand in hand, heart to heart. The village slowly accepted their love, and over time, the tension faded. The other girls, though hurt, understood that love was not a competition. It was about finding someone who made your heart feel at home. Ben had learned that the heart knows what it needs, and sometimes, it takes a little time to find that one person who truly fits. And when you do, you hold on to them, no matter the challenges. The village, once full of conflict and uncertainty, now lived in harmony. Ben and Sarah were not just a couple, they were a reminder that true love doesn't happen overnight. It takes patience, understanding, and, above all, listening to the heart. The months passed in the village, and life continued to unfold in its gentle, predictable way. Ben and Sarah's relationship grew deeper, filled with the kind of quiet moments that spoke louder than any words ever could. They spent long afternoons by the river, walked through the fields under the golden sunsets, and shared dreams about the future. The villagers, once skeptical, had slowly come to accept their bond, seeing the genuine love that had grown between them. However, no matter how content Ben felt with his decision, there were still moments of doubt. He sometimes wondered if he had made the right choice, if perhaps there was something he had missed in the rush to listen to his heart. But every time he looked at Sarah, every time she smiled at him with that kind, understanding gaze, all his doubts vanished. One afternoon, as Ben helped Sarah tend to her small garden, something happened that would change everything. Sarah was trimming some flowers when she suddenly stopped and looked at Ben with a serious expression. "Ben," she said softly, "I've been thinking a lot lately, and I need to tell you something." Ben put down the rake he was holding and turned to her, concern creeping into his heart. "What is it, Sarah?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath. "I love you. You know that. But I think it's time for me to leave." Ben blinked, his heart skipping a beat. "Viv, what do you mean?" "I've been offered a job in the next town over," Sarah explained, her voice steady but full of emotion. "It's something I've wanted for a while. A chance to make a real difference in people's lives. It's a big opportunity, but it means I'll have to leave the village." Ben felt his chest tighten. The thought of Sarah leaving was unbearable. But he understood. This was her dream, her chance to grow and do something important. He couldn't hold her back, not when it was something she truly wanted. "I don't want to leave you, Ben," Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. "But I think I have to do this. I need to be more than just someone's partner. I need to find out who I am on my own." Ben reached out and took her hands in his heart heavy with a mix of sadness and understanding. "I understand, Sarah," he said, his voice quiet. "You have to follow your own path. And if this is what you need, I'll support you." They stood there for a long time, holding hands, neither of them knowing exactly what would happen next. Sarah's departure loomed over them like a dark cloud, but Ben knew deep down that this was something they both had to face. The following weeks were a blur of emotions. The village seemed quieter without Sarah's laughter filling the air, without her kindness and warmth. Ben continued his daily tasks, but everything felt different. He spent a lot of time walking through the fields and by the river, trying to make sense of his feelings. He missed Sarah terribly, but he also knew that they both had to live their own lives, even if that meant going separate ways. On the day Sarah was leaving, the village gathered to say goodbye. There was a bittersweet air of farewell as everyone crowded around to wish her luck. Ben stood off to the side, watching her with a heavy heart. He knew that this was the right thing, but it didn't make it any easier. When the time came for Sarah to leave, she walked up to Ben, her suitcase in hand. They stood facing each other, both struggling to find the right words. "I'll miss you, Ben," Sarah said quietly. "You'll always be a part of me, no matter where I go." Ben smiled softly, the sadness in his eyes matched by the warmth in his voice. "I'll miss you too, Sarah. But I'll always be here if you need me." And with that, Sarah gave him a final hug, and then she turned and walked away, the sound of her footsteps slowly fading into the distance. Ben watched her go, his heart aching but also filled with a quiet sense of peace. He knew this was the right decision. They had loved each other, but now it was time for them both to grow on their own. And though he felt a deep loss, he also felt a sense of hope. The future was uncertain, but he knew that life had a way of bringing people together when the time was right. Months passed, and Ben focused on his own growth. He spent more time helping the village, building his business, and becoming a mentor to the younger boys who looked up to him. But no matter what he did, there was always a part of him that remembered Sarah. He wondered how she was, what she was doing, and whether she was happy. One day, years later, a letter arrived at Ben's doorstep. It was from Sarah. He opened it eagerly, his heart pounding as he read her words. Dear Ben, I don't know if you remember the last time we spoke, but I've thought about you so many times since then. I'm doing well here, but there's something I've realized. I was chasing my dream, but I was also running from something. And I finally understand that something now. It's you, Ben. You were always the person I was meant to be with. You've always been my home. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to see if we can build something new, together. I've missed you, and I've never forgotten you. I hope you feel the same. Yours, always, Sarah. Ben felt tears well up in his eyes as he finished reading. A smile spread across his face. He had never stopped loving Sarah, and now, it seemed like their paths were crossing again, this time for good. He immediately packed his things and set out for the town where Sarah had gone. The journey was long, but he didn't mind. The anticipation in his heart made every step worthwhile. When he finally arrived, he found Sarah sitting by a quiet lake, just as she had been the first time they met. She looked up, her eyes shining as she saw him approaching. Ben, she whispered, as if afraid this was all a dream. Ben smiled and took her hand. I've missed you, Sarah. And I've never stopped loving you. And so, their story began anew. They didn't know what the future held, but they were ready to face it together, side by side. The village that once saw them as two separate paths now saw them as a united force, a reminder that sometimes, love takes time, but when it's right, it lasts forever. And in the end, Ben and Sarah knew that no matter how difficult the road had been, it had brought them to where they were meant to be. Together, always and forever.